meeting, or do they have to wait until 6?
I think they have to wait until we start the broadcast.
Got it. Okay. Good to know. 1 minute.
Councilmember Wahab just sent us an email. I guess she's looking for the link.
She was just here.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, no, I'm here. It's the link is never attached to the date, the save the date on your calendar, so you always have to kind of search through it.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
Send the reminder at around 4:30 this afternoon with the link.
Okay. Are we ready? Thank you for that reminder. Are we ready to go?
You can start it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Homelessness and Housing Task Force of the City of Hayward. I'll call this meeting to order. And could we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Wahab. Here. Councilmember Salinas.
Here.
Councilmember Lamnin.
Thank you. I'm here as well. And we are holding this meeting virtually in accordance to the shelter-in-place orders by Alameda County as well as the state of California. And I'll turn it actually back to you, Yolanda, for announcements about interpretation and public comments.
Good evening, everyone. This evening, we are offering Spanish interpretation service. If you are joining the meeting using the Zoom application, you'll be able to select either English or Spanish. The interpretation is now live and will pop up on your screen. Panelists now need to select English on their Zoom toolbar from the interpretation button. When selecting Spanish, it is recommended to select mute original audio to listen to the meeting in Spanish. Our interpreter will now make the announcement in Spanish.
Is our interpreter still? Oh, there she is. Is that being made on the Spanish line? And is it possible to have it on this line? Louder? Yeah, Monica. Okay, we're all good?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Chair, you now have the floor. Please proceed with the meeting.
Thank you very much. Do we have a slide of instructions regarding how to make public comments? Yolanda, you're muted. And so just while you're getting unmuted, Yolanda, so I'll pause for a moment in case there were any public comments that are not related to the homelessness strategic plan or the minutes. And Yolanda, did you have an announcement about that?
All right. If you wish to speak, if someone wishes to speak and you're using the Zoom application, please click the raise hand button. If you're dialing in, press *9 to raise your hand on the phone and use *6 to unmute yourself. If you are streaming the meeting through Zoom on your computer, but dialing in via phone, please mute yourself so that there is no feedback sound during the meeting. If there is disruptive feedback or excessive noise during the meeting, your microphone will be disabled. Thank you.
Thank you. So at this point, not seeing any public comments not related. So these would be comments not related to the strategic plan. And so then we'll move on to the minutes. Do we have either a motion or any?
I will move the items, but with the amendment that was emailed to us included.
Perfect. Thank you.
Right.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mark. Do we need to roll call vote or can I do that by consensus?
For the minutes, we can do consensus, I believe.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any objections to approving the minutes as amended? Seeing none, we'll call that unanimous. Thank you. And now we'll move on to the update on the homelessness efforts, including input regarding the development of a strategic plan regarding homelessness. So we'll start with the staff report and then we'll go to public comments and then questions and comments from council members. Who am I turning this over to?
I'll go.
Okay.
Thank you,
Amy.
Councilmember. Yeah, and I think Monica is going to help with the slide sharing.
Great.
Thank you, Monica. I'll wait until it's full screen. Perfect. Okay, well, good evening, council members, community members. My name is Amy Cole-Bloom. I'm a management analyst in the Housing and Community Services Division. I'm joined here tonight with my colleagues, and we'll all be kind of popping in throughout this presentation. So this is our update on the homelessness efforts throughout the city, and then we're going to specifically dive into soliciting your input on the homelessness reduction strategic plan. We have our team from Homebase here with us tonight to help us with that. So go ahead, Monica. Here's an overview of what we'll be talking about this evening. So we'll give you kind of an overview on our efforts to address homelessness in the city, especially within the context of COVID-19 and what our response updates have been. We'll have some discussion around the homelessness reduction strategic plan, and then we'll give you some context as to what our next steps are, both with the strategic plan and with our homelessness response in general. Go ahead, Monica. Great. So in Hayward, these are some numbers in terms of what we know about our homelessness population. We know that from the point in time count conducted in 2017 to the count conducted in 2019, that there was a 23% increase in our homeless population in Hayward. We also know that of the folks who are homeless in Hayward, 76% of them are living unsheltered, which means that they are not in a homeless shelter. They're living in tents, in their cars, on the streets. And we know anecdotally, and we're starting to see more research come out at the state level and national level, that due to the COVID-19 pandemic, many folks are experiencing or at risk of experiencing income loss, which leaves them vulnerable to eviction, foreclosure, or homelessness. And we're seeing a more visible and acute crisis. So we want to give you, it's kind of two dense slides, but we really wanted to paint a picture of what has been happening in Hayward, not just during the COVID-19 pandemic, but all of the things that we have done as a city to address homelessness in Hayward. So as you know, and we'll talk about more, the Hayward Navigation Center was opened just over a year ago, celebrated the anniversary just last month. And that's that provides shelter and housing navigation services to homeless Hayward adults. In July of 2019, the city passed the Residential Rent Stabilization and Tenant Protection Ordinance intended to reduce displacement of many Hayward renters and increase protections for Hayward renters. The city created a strategic roadmap for this, citywide, earlier this year, and included preserve, protect, and produce housing for all as a key priority in that plan. The city passed a temporary eviction moratorium that was in effect through September of 2020, and that was both for non-payment of rent and mortgage payments caused by COVID-19 to prevent evictions. That has since ended, but the county moratorium is in place, and that's in place until 60 days past the end of the public health crisis. We also passed the Tenant Relocation Assistance Ordinance over the summer, which was intended to align the City of Hayward rent ordinance with state law, as well as to guarantee assistance to renters who qualify and are displaced due to necessary substantial repairs or health and safety concerns. Next slide. Additionally, getting more specific into our COVID-19 response, we've allocated over $900,000 for emergency rent relief grants to support low-income renters, and $75,000 for foreclosure prevention counseling for homeowners. And that's one-on-one counseling as well as education workshops for homeowners who are experiencing financial impacts from COVID-19 and are at risk of foreclosure. We've also allocated over $600,000 in CDBG. This is the Community Development Block Grant emergency funds for food access and shelter services for unhoused folks and folks who are at risk of becoming homeless. And that includes like the city's pop-up food bank, as well as some other food services and shelter providers in the community. We also make our annual allocation of local and federal funds. That was made in over the summer for our current fiscal year 2021. And we are currently working on next fiscal year's funding process, and we do that allocation annually, both federal funds as well as our local general fund. And those the allocation of those funds goes towards supporting projects and programs that address homelessness and housing issues in Hayward. And then finally, Council approved an agreement with Homebase, who are here with us this evening, to be a consultant for a strategic plan for a 5-year path to reducing homelessness in Hayward. In general, talking about COVID-19 and what that response has looked like, we have taken part in the county's Project Room Key. Project Room Key is done, Alameda County is collaborating with Alameda County Healthcare for the Homeless, Abode Services, the state, and collectively they have initiated Project Room Key. This provides hotels for temporary housing for unsheltered residents as part of this big picture emergency response to COVID-19. But the program is soon winding down in Alameda County. So many of the hotel leases are expiring by the end of the calendar year. And as of the start of last month, November 1, referrals are no longer being accepted for the Safer Ground program as part of Project Room Key in Alameda County. And there's no additional folks being placed. So we're actually working right now with the county to get updated numbers for you all in terms of who from Hayward was placed in that Safer Ground project, and we hope to have those updates for you soon. We have had responses at downtown Hayward and City Hall. This includes increasing our maintenance, increasing police presence, and opening a new bathroom for folks to use at the downtown parking garage. This is actually where I'm going to toss it over to my colleague, Jessica Lobadan, to talk a little bit more about the Navigation Center. And Jessica, if you also want to add more about the downtown Hayward and City Hall response, please feel free.
Sounds good.
You can do it better justice.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, just to add on a little bit to some of the responses to increase responses in response to the increase of more acute homelessness in downtown Hayward, deploying additional officers during the week and during the weekend, as well as Amy mentioned, hiring additional maintenance staff, 2 temporary staff to provide daily cleaning in the area. And then the permanent restroom will open hopefully by January, the end of January. So for the Navigation Center, as Amy mentioned, it's been open for just about a year now. And due to the pandemic, the capacity at the Navigation Center unfortunately had to be reduced by about 50% to allow for adequate social distancing. In October, we were able to utilize 4 of the FEMA RV trailers to put those on site and increase capacity by 8 individuals. And then we are also planning to put a 3rd trailer on site to get the capacity back up to 45 individuals while still allowing for adequate social distancing.
Great, and we actually have a little bit more information about the Nav Center on the next slide. I realize I put the point in time count in here. I wanted to give you all an update because city staff are serving on the point in time count planning committee. And as of yesterday, we got kind of a clearer picture. So I wanted to give you that update. So Jessica's going to come back with more NAV Center information in just a second, but I'm going to jump in with the point in time count. So as you can imagine, the Hayward or the Alameda County point in time count, where they do, typically we do a count of sheltered and unsheltered individuals in Alameda County. And last year we got specific Hayward data out of that city staff across different departments have used quite often. That's going to be challenging this year to do it safely and to do it accurately. So there's been lots of conversations, and ultimately, well, I should step back. HUD has explicitly expressed a desire to see an unsheltered count from Alameda County. They look to Alameda County as kind of a barometer, and so they want to make sure that the county does an unsheltered count. With that in mind, we are paying very close attention to safety of the folks who do the count. Typically, a lot of vulnerable folks are the volunteers who are going out and doing that count. And we also want to make sure that we're maintaining the safety of the folks who are being counted. HUD's provided some flexibility around the point in time count. They're looking for jurisdictions to report, and I'm quoting HUD, a general sense of the change in the unsheltered population. So what Alameda County is committed to doing is a sheltered count in the same way that we always do, as well as getting the subpopulation data, so understanding of the folks who are homeless and in shelter, getting a little bit more about family size, ability status, veteran status, gender, race, that kind of thing. For the unsheltered count, at this point in time, the county will just be doing a visual count that's tentatively, please don't go recruiting for these dates yet. They're still to be determined. But tentatively, they're looking at February 24th and 25th for the in that morning visual count. At this point, they aren't going to be doing the survey to get more detailed demographic information. I can tell you folks that lots of people on the planning committee are pushing for that survey to be done as soon as it can be done safely, because we know that demographic data is really important. And the City of Hayward's racial equity plan really depends on having that demographic data to understand who our homeless population is. It just will likely be delayed. So with that, Monica, you can go to the next slide. I'm going to turn it back to Jessica to talk about the Navigation Center exits.
Awesome. So I'm going to give just a little bit of information on the year one outcomes. So in the first year of operation at the Navigation Center, I'm happy to say that 45 individuals were moved into permanent housing. So this chart shows the breakdown of all of the participants who have engaged in services at the Navigation Center. So in total, there's been 91 individuals who have either gone through and exited the Navigation Center and or are currently living at the Navigation Center. So at the time of this report, there were 26 individuals on site with 45 exits to permanent housing, 16 exits to the county Safer Ground program, and then 4 exits without placement. So discounting the exits to Safer Ground, because that technically in HUD terms counts as an emergency shelter exit, that's a 92% success rate of move-outs to permanent housing. And then when we break down that 45 further, 32 exits were exits using rapid rehousing, which means that there was a flex fund subsidy tied to the move out. So it's likely that individuals were placed into independent housing, not with family or friends, and they used their flex funds to support their housing placement. 7 exits through family reunification, 5 exits through friend reunification, and 1 exit to permanent supportive housing. Next slide. And then here's a little bit of data on the race and ethnicity demographics of the Navigation Center. So when we designed the prioritization policy and came to this group about 1.5 years ago, we really designed it with racial equity at the forefront to prioritize groups that have been disproportionately impacted by homelessness. And in doing so, really wanted the population of the Navigation Center to mirror that of the Hayward's homeless population rather than Hayward's general population, because there's disproportionately impacted groups who experience homelessness. So here's a side-by-side view of the racial demographics of the Navigation Center versus the overall Hayward point-in-time count population. And so what we see here is that the populations that are disproportionately impacted, which are Black and African American, as well as American Indian, Alaskan Native, those are roughly mirrored with the Hayward homeless population, and then the Hayward overall, or the Navigation Center overall population. We don't have a comparison with the ethnicity of Navigation Center clients to the overall Hayward homeless population. That data was not provided for the entire population. So is there a next slide after this, Monica? With race and, okay. If you could go back just 1 second, I'll say, I don't think this slide made it in here, and so I'll be talking about it next week at the council meeting. But we also disaggregated the permanent housing exits by race as well, and that mirrors the population as well. So we really wanted to make sure that it wasn't just folks were being served in a comparable way, but like making it into the door, but also exiting out of the program into permanent housing. All right, next slide. All right, and so I'm really excited to talk about this, and I will preface this with the full presentation is going to council next Tuesday. So this is an extremely high level overview. But one additional response that we are going to be seeking approval for is to open up a housing navigation center annex out of a local hotel. And so this would be to provide individuals with increased vulnerabilities to COVID with temporary shelter, plus dedicated housing navigation services and flexible funding in order to be able to move into permanent housing. The program would be designed to mirror the current Navigation Center service delivery model, but again, it would be working with a local hotel provider to house individuals in the isolation housing units. And it would serve up to 35 individuals, is what the current funding would allow. So again, I'll be giving a full presentation on Tuesday, but just wanted to give this brief update tonight.
Thank you, Jessica. So we're going to shift gears now into the strategic plan portion of our discussion, where we really want to spend most of our time with you this evening. I wanted to start by giving just sort of a progress update on where things stand. So I believe we entered into this agreement with Homebase back in September, October. It's COVID time. I'm a little warped. But within the last couple of months, and we've been working very hard. We are concurrently in phases both 1 and 2. So our Homebase team is conducting an assessment of our existing system and services, and they're also working on their stakeholder engagement and input process, of which this is a part. We have had our first steering committee meeting of stakeholders that represent the community members, local providers, city staff, both from City Hall and police department. Councilmember Lambden is a member. And so that has had our first kickoff meeting, and we'll be meeting monthly to kind of guide and give input throughout the process. And right now, Homebase is also beginning one-on-one conversations and focus groups with community members and providers, and then preparing for a large community meeting in the new year. And I'm going to, at this point, introduce our team. I think all three of them actually I see are here. So Lauren Laren, Amanda Werman, and Melissa Hong are from Homebase. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to them.
Thanks so much, Amy. Really appreciate the introduction, and thank you so much to the council members and to this task force for having us here tonight to speak with you. As Amy mentioned, my name is Amanda Wehrman. I'm a deputy director with Homebase. Just to give a teensy bit of context about our organization, we're a nonprofit public policy organization focused on homelessness. We're based out of San Francisco, but we do work in communities around the country, including working on the ground with local communities, as well as a technical assistance provider for the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. So we come with a lot of context about how communities, large and small across our nation, are responding to homelessness, and we'll bring that lens and context around national best practices and kind of emerging practices that might be a good fit for some of the identified needs that emerge through this local strategic planning process in Hayward. So we are, as Amy mentioned, engaging in stakeholder conversations at a number of different levels. A lot of interview questions are flying left and right. And part of what was included in the staff report tonight is a few anchoring questions that we're looking to have a conversation around with each of you. Is that on a slide coming up? Perfect. So we have 3 questions that we'll go over, and we're really just looking for some open-ended conversation with you all that will help us to contextualize some of the information that we've been identifying through our environmental scan and doing some deep dives into the data information that are already available to us. So we really appreciate you helping to bring some life to the information we've been diving into. And so we'll be talking through 3 questions tonight that effectively boil down to, what's important to you, what do you need more of, and what do you think is going to work to make that happen? So with that, why don't we take a look at this first question, which is about your priorities and goals. We know that you all, as the task force, have been focused on this issue for some time and have been doing some deep thinking about this. And so we'd really love to hear from each of you what you see as the priorities and goals in terms of addressing homelessness in the city of Hayward. As well as if you have any historical context or thoughts about how priorities may have evolved in recent years. And as we look ahead to the coming years, any additional shifts that we might be anticipating, since, as Amy mentioned, this is a 5-year plan that we'll be putting into development. So with that one, I open it up. Would love to hear your thoughts about priorities and goals.
So actually, can we do that after we do the public comment component?
Oh, sure. Yes.
Okay. So are there other pieces that are part of the staff report component now?
We just have our next steps. And if we want, we can jump ahead and I'll cover what those are real quick. And then we can go back to the public comment. So just so you know, in terms of the strategic plan, as Amanda said, there's ongoing data collection right now. They'll be attending a meeting with the Community Services Commission this month, and getting a similar feedback conversation there with a draft plan for council and budget integration into our budget, the city's budget in the spring. On the homelessness response side, as Jessica said, December 8th council meeting, you'll be seeing a lot of our faces again. We'll be talking about the Navigation Center Annex that will go before council for authorization. Additionally, allocation of our 3rd round of CARES Act funding will go to council on the 8th. And that's for you to review the plan for spending those funds, which the CSC saw last month. And then in January to February, assuming that council authorizes it, the Navigation Center Annex will be implemented. So that's just the kind of quick high-level overview of what's next on both of these sides. And actually, will we have the opportunity for council members to ask questions on what we've talked about to this point as well? that what you're about to say? Sorry.
No, I didn't want to cut you off at all. I just wanted, so anything else sort of from a staff report perspective? I know there's stuff we got to talk about, but we'll get to that.
No,
Nothing
I think we can hold on the strategic plan questions.
Okay, great. So yeah, what I'd like to do, if this works for everybody, is to open it up. I know we have a lot of, or a number of folks who are leaders in the homelessness community, both from Hayward and from Alameda County, which is really exciting. Glad to see everybody here. And so I want to give everybody a chance to weigh in, and then we'll come back to that dialogue that you're talking about, Amanda. I definitely don't want to prevent that from happening. That's the goal of tonight, but we'll do the public comment part first. That work for everybody? Great. So, Yolanda, I'm guessing we have a timer somewhere. And just a reminder to use the raise hand button and or *9 if you are on the phone. And I see we have a couple of folks, so there's that timer. Okay. And Yolanda, you're ready to, it looks like Zachariah Okenda is our first speaker.
I don't see the attendees panel on my screen.
Okay, it looks like Zachariah has been promoted and is unmuted. So okay to have him go.
Let me know when I should start now.
I think so. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Zachariah.
Thank you, Councilwoman. So my name is Zachariah Okenda. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you all from home base over there. Thank you for coming and doing this wonderful work in the city of Hayward. I am a graduate of Berkeley Law. I've done a lot of work on housing and homelessness over the last several years, and my family is directly impacted by homelessness. We were homeless as a family, and my younger brother actually was homeless for 5 months in the county of Alameda in the last year, given a lot of the challenges that many of our family members face. So definitely familiar with these barriers. I wanted to just speak to the questions that Amanda, you were referring to. I have the agenda packet, and I have some of my own answers as a member of the community and thoughts, reflections on that. So to start with question 1 and question 2, I kind of roll them up together to think about them this way. I would say that the goal in my mind is affordable, decent housing for all. This, to me, I think means simultaneously reducing the flow of people into homelessness from unstable housing while increasing access to housing through the preserve, protect, and produce housing approach that was mentioned in the staff report. The priorities for me right now are emergency triage, given the pandemic, and I think this is related to stopping the displacement of people from encampments, except for the people who we know are getting referred to supportive housing programs like the Navigation Center and the new annex. And I actually, for question, a little bit of question 3 here, but I looked to home base as I was looking through your website, and I see you did some work with Santa Rosa. And I think one of the case studies you've done there highlights some of the work that we can do here in Hayward through the HEAP pilot to better communicate and work with people in our encampments. I know we're hiring the 2 people to do cleanup in downtown. I'd like to see that expanded across the city with access to more hygiene facilities and portable restrooms. So jumping into the third question, and I know you have 30 seconds here. I think the city's plan right now, I understand, and I agree with, is to integrate the changes in state legislation first in completing the planning and zoning changes. That's kind of streamlining the housing development stage of things. I think that's a good starting place. And for additional solutions, I think we should look to the CASA Compact, a plan you're probably familiar with at this point that integrates the preserve, protect, and produce housing approach in the Bay Area. And I would add to that the consideration of a cost-benefit analysis of a property vacancy tax to encourage property sale and development, hopefully in the context of upzoning and increased affordable development. So those are my comments. I really appreciate the opportunity to share. Thanks.
Thank you. And I also want to acknowledge that we have a number of commissioners, including Mr. Kenda and some of our other speakers from our Community Services Commission tonight. So thank you also for being here. Looks like our next speaker is Sally Hindman.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I work for an organization called Youth Spirit Artworks, and we are located in South Berkeley. We are a jobs readiness program that works with homeless and low-income underserved youth ages 16 to 25. And youth from our program initiated a project some years back to create a youth tiny house village. And they have worked, this youth-initiated project, really youth were involved in attending hundreds of meetings over a period of 3 years to create this tiny house village. And our project is about to open in Oakland and will serve 26 homeless young people. And we think that it would be an amazing model for Hayward and specifically for Cal State East Bay students. But I want to start out by introducing the youth from our program that are here that have been some of the leaders in creating our project, and they really can speak for themselves. And so I might tag team back if it's possible, but I want to introduce Justin Jones and Inti Gonzalez, who are here to speak about what they did and how it's coming to fruition.
And unfortunately, we don't have a great way to toggle people back and forth, Sally. So if you want to go ahead and complete your comments, I see that Justin has raised his hand and Inti is here. And if you want to raise your hand, and you raised your hand as well. So we will definitely include them in the public comment time. So,
okay, yes, we have a number of people from our organization in the Zoom call.
Great.
Well, our model, it has involved 32 interfaith congregations from the East Bay. So it's really the East Bay religious community saying we want to do something really concrete and real to address the challenges of homelessness that youth are experiencing. And we have involved over 2,000 volunteers from the interfaith religious community and from other interested community organizations in the project to create the Youth Tiny House Village. And our youth both designed the tiny house prototype that we are working with, and then they were literally involved in decision-making around every aspect of the tiny house village as a solution meeting their needs. So they did everything from help to staff 13 working groups working on the project to actually doing building, they literally designed and built our tiny house prototype, and went to fundraising meetings and just everything that you can think of. But they had, because they were involved in every aspect of designing and executing this project, they have full ownership of the project, and it really meets their needs. And this is a community that they've created, a tiny house village community. So the residents of the village are going to be participating in shared meals together. They'll be doing gardening together and other chores. They have worked to create over 150 murals for the tiny house village, and just in multiple ways have done a massive amount of work to create something that's truly a first in nation tiny house village that can be replicated in Hayward and in other places around the country. So that's a starting point. Thank you.
Thank you. And because we broke in, I let that go a little bit longer, but thank you, Sally. Looks like our next speaker is Sarah Taylor. If you can unmute, Sarah. There we go. Can you unmute yourself, Sarah? There we go.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Hi, everybody. So I'm the chair of the social work department at Cal State East Bay, and I'm coordinating a project called Make Room, Housing Justice in Higher Ed. And I'm delighted tonight to hear about all the work going on in Hayward to support people who are unhoused. Council member Sarah Lamnin has been collaborating on our project, and we've been so grateful for her support. As you may know, CSU East Bay receives high rankings nationally in measures of racial and ethnic diversity and social mobility. We have an extraordinary opportunity at CSUEB to teach, collaborate, and learn with students from underrepresented and vulnerable groups. Our students are committed scholars, scientists, artists, organizers, and future leaders who contribute to our communities. However, many of our students experience significant barriers to their academic achievement. In 2017, our campus was awarded a grant from the Stupsky Foundation to investigate and identify facilitators and barriers of student success. One of the things we have learned is how access to food and housing present a major obstacle for many of our students. A 2017 survey of 770 students on our campus conducted by the CSU Basic Needs Initiative found that about half of students were experiencing some degree of food insecurity, and over 18% experienced at least one episode of homelessness within the past 12 months. Unsurprisingly, food insecurity and homelessness were associated with having a lower GPA. All CSUs, including our campus, now have campus food pantries and other emergency supports. However, when the team working on our grant looked at the constellation of student challenges, one we felt required more focus was housing. The resource simply isn't there. This conversation, which we began last winter, is what launched the Make Room Housing Justice in Higher Ed project that we're currently wrapping up. The vision for this project was to bring stakeholders, students, faculty, staff, administrators, and community partners together to make some progress in tackling the issue of housing for students on our campus. We began with a half-day kickoff event in August where we heard from students with lived experience of housing challenges, researchers, policymakers, and nonprofit program leaders. Following the kickoff, we formed 5 small action-focused groups working on tiny homes, social media outreach, legislative advocacy, direct support and resources, and writing an op-ed. We're having our year-end celebration tomorrow at 10:45 in the morning, and anyone on this task force would be most welcome to join. Sarah has the invitation link. I don't think I have access to the chat, but Sarah can share that information. And though our project is wrapping up formally, we anticipate that our work will continue, and we would be very glad to collaborate with any task force members about how to increase access to housing for college students. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. And we did post that in the Task Force to End Hunger and Homelessness, which is the grassroots version of this committee that's been around for many years before this was created. Thank you, Sarah. Commissioner Vasuri.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, task force members. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak. I have 2 questions. The first one is, Jessica, you mentioned about the bathroom downtown. If it's possible to share a little more information about that. As you know, I've been concerned about the issue of lack of bathrooms since my girls are very small. You know, the downtown park that's there, there's no bathroom closed for families or elderly or anybody who needs to use the restroom downtown to go to a restroom without bothering a business to use their restroom. So I'd like to hear more about that and how we can think about, you know, making a more secure bathroom for family friendly, elderly friendly, homeless friendly, so multiple people can use it. The second question I have, you know, I live pretty much across the street from the plunge. So a lot of my houseless neighbors, you know, I see every day, driving my car or walking in the neighborhood. And a lot of them I feel have some mental health issues. And, you know, I know this is a challenge sometimes for these individuals to feel comfortable to move into a shelter. But I'm wondering, not being an expert on this, in that, how do we support those individuals in that process to hopefully get some type of shelter overhead, right? I mean, these individuals I've been out this side for years. I've seen them ever since I lived on this street. And just a little concerned, especially about those, of course, those ones, everybody who's houseless in Hayward, but also especially those ones who are dealing with a lot of mental health issues, possibly some drug and alcohol use. But I've seen them for years just down the street, right? So that's what I'm wondering, how to especially support those who are dealing with mental health issues, maybe drug and alcohol abuse issues, and getting them some more secure housing. Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. And we'll have the opportunity to hear a little bit more about the responses after the public comment time. So, Doris Ingram.
Hello, council members and everyone on the call, and a nod to Amanda. It's good to see you. My name is Doris Ingram, and I am the program coordinator for our basic needs department at Cal State East Bay. And what that is that we provide direct services to students who are experiencing emergency crisis situations, including food insecurity and housing insecurity. And for a little background, I run the food pantries and then do placements for students who are unhoused and are currently attending and enrolled at Cal State East Bay. For a little background, we had over 4,000 appointments for food service in the last year. And that does include students coming in and coming back to receive different food services. And since September of 2019, we have 8 beds on campus that are supported as shelter services for students who are unhoused to stay there on a temporary basis. We had about 16 students that we've placed, but the placements have been very long. And so that was over 963 days of placements for students who are unhoused or housing insecure. And so as we're looking at this plan, I'm also a part of the Make Room project and coordinating some of the work that's going to be happening with the direct services. So I do encourage everyone to attend that can tomorrow. But I did want to mention, as you're looking at plans, to consider students. Students have some very unique challenges in that many times they're not considered high risk for some of the shelter services. So programs like YSA are very supportive for students that are in college. And some of those are because many of our students are not included in the point in time counts because they are not necessarily on the streets. They're couch surfing and they're sort of the invisible unhoused, but they're very, very much unhoused, and they are having some of the same concerns that you may see people that are choosing to be in tent services. So I wanted to just reach out to council members, and as we're looking at this plan, to really consider students and possibilities for students. And there's a variety of issues that are happening with students. Some do have mental health. Many are unstably, they're not able to work like they would, and school is not considered income as they're making that progression to graduation. And so as we're looking at the 14,000 students that are just up the hill and part of the Hayward community that are still very much a part of the community, we still are housing almost 300 students in university housing. And again, providing many more students with support services when it comes to being unhoused, especially after the pandemic. And one of the things that we are seeing too are also our international students who are having a very difficult time to get back to other countries and things of that nature. So I just wanted to share that as my time ends.
Thank you. And next up, Commissioner Chauhan.
Hello, good evening, all council members. Thank you for the opportunity to have. I'm not going to take 3 minutes, I hope. The only thing that really I find a little bit missing wherever homelessness is being talked about, and particularly because my background is healthcare, one of the themes is mental health. Since I worked the days in the free clinic up in Tenderloin area, we do look at so many other factors that contribute to homelessness. A lot of energy is put into it, and that's really good. But especially right now, working in a hospital, I do see that one of the biggest missing part that kind of contributes to homelessness, and it's a cycle, it's a revolving door, is about the mental health. And especially this pandemic that we are going through and how it's going to get even worse in coming days, irrespective of who believes in it or not. This is some reality that is out there. I particularly in the hospital am seeing an increase in mental health related cases and homelessness. So it would really be very nice to see that at some point mental health is included in all these strategic thinking that is being put together, because that is one area that is not being addressed. So with that comment, thank you for all this wonderful work you all are doing. This is definitely looking very promising, and I'm very proud to be a resident of Hayward and have such a wonderful council who's looking into addressing these key aspects. So thank you for all the good work you all are doing, and wish you all the best.
Thank you. Inti Gonzalez.
Hi, sorry, can I go after the next speaker?
I think we can do that, yes. So did you want to follow Justin Jones or Sean McCreary?
Either one is fine.
Okay, fair enough.
Bye.
Sure. Sean McCreary?
Hello, council members. My name is Sean McCreary. I am speaking on behalf of Youth Spirit Artworks. I'm a leader in the South Berkeley nonprofit. Just giving some input and feedback and some updates. We've been in cooperation with Cal State East Bay to support their project and their endeavor in completing a tiny house village of their own for unhoused college students, and working with them to build strategies and move forward with their initiative in ways that we've had. And given the evidence that our work is successful, we think that it's a advantageous partnership that we want to embark on. Not to show our hand, but we're advising them to get in contact with local churches in Hayward and make committees and pods of students around organizing committees. Already, we've been told that there's social media campaigns and there's researching pods, and we just think that our partnership will furthermore grow the accessible housing like opportunities in the East Bay. I heard earlier mentions of housing that is protected, produced, and preserved. And I think that if we look at our motto, I'd like to know more whether or not our system that we've made at 633 Hagenberger in Oakland could be replicated in the city of Hayward, whether those be we are in line with the coding or zoning laws and what have you. I think we just like more information so we could best advise Cal State East Bay along throughout the process. And I can see my time and give it to Justin Jones or Inti Gonzalez. That's all I'd have to say.
Thank you. And we'll go to Inti Gonzalez.
Hi. Sally and Sean said most of everything, but yeah, this project is going to be, we're going to do a lot of work on it and work hard, and it's going to be exciting and great. I don't really know too much of what to say since Sally and Sean said most of it, but we're going to do a good job, and sorry.
It's okay.
All right, I'm done.
Okay. Well, we're happy to have you here this evening. Thank you. And looks like our final speaker is Justin Jones.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So, people I work with have honestly said a lot. And I just wanted to add the fact that our entire campaign right now is 100 homes for 100 youth. But I don't think that means that we don't stand for homes for homeless people just in general. So I guess that's why we decided to come here and support California East Bay, because they gave the statistics, and it goes to show that people need housing in such a transformative times in their lives. And based on what we're doing in Oakland and the success that we ensure to have with it, I think we could do the same with California East Bay and really make an important difference for everybody who needs housing that wants to make a change educationally. So I don't think I need 2 more minutes to speak. So thank you.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. It's an honor to have the youth leaders here this evening. And I see Julia Lang has raised her hand. Go ahead, Julia.
Hi, all. Julia Lang here from Downtown Streets Team. I'm the East Bay Director, and it's great to see you all and very excited to meet you from home base and looking forward to what this strategic process yields. Hayward has such a mighty spirit in addressing these issues, and we've been under-resourced for a really, really long time, and we're thrilled to see the creation of the annex coming down the line. Something we've witnessed at Downtown Streets Team, we have a work experience program where we engage people in the experience of homelessness in cleaning up the community, working on learning new job skills, and ultimately reaching their goals towards exiting homelessness, gaining greater income, and integrating into the community in a meaningful way. So what we've seen from our team members as of late is things becoming way more complicated because of COVID, of course, no access to bathrooms, shelter space being limited, and really just an incredibly limited response. Something we also see a lot of is resources only going to the most vulnerable people, folks who do an assessment, score very high in vulnerability, and then ultimately get slotted for permanent supportive housing, which is an incredibly limited resource. We wish it wasn't, but we know it is. And so we're really interested in what are the creative solutions for people who don't fit the bill of the most vulnerable, and how do we work outside of silos and effectively in partnership with the resources that do exist in a creative way that kind of links the chains together for folks in ensuring that they have a pathway out of homelessness, because it doesn't look the same. You know, we could have shallow subsidy programs that support people who are able to get back into the workforce with the right tools and community support. And we could have housing interventions where people share space potentially. And we love YSA and their beautiful tiny home project. Great to hear you guys on this call. But I really want to see this connectivity between our networks. And we're working on a partnership with some of the shelters to provide some employment services, because we know a lot of folks are interested and able to get back to the workforce, like I said, with the right tools and the right interventions. And so we want to make sure that effort is getting into all the spaces where folks want to have that access. And we look forward to partnering and learning more about the needs and figuring out where Downtown Streets Team can play a role and take our part in this process. So thank you. It's great to be here, and I am all done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, seeing no other speakers, I'll thank our speakers again and move into public comments, and just started thinking through if we wanted to do, why don't we do the questions first, and then the targeted questions, and then if there are other questions, we can get to those after. Does that make sense for folks? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Also, we have an email address to reach the home-based team that we can post right now for the folks who are on the call, in case some of our attendees have to leave.
Perfect.
I think Monica's pulling that up for us.
Great. And is there an interested parties list that is getting created for this effort that people could sign up for?
I will defer to the home-based team for that question.
We are certainly happy to work on something like that. I think we were anticipating targeting some of your existing listservs as some initial outreach, but we can certainly, as we get, for example, RSVPs to the community forum, once we have that date firmed up and things like that, I think it totally makes sense to establish a list that we're continuing to update folks on. So we can definitely work on that.
Great. Thank you. So that's Hayward at homebase.ccc homelessness.org. And okay, do you want to pull up that first question, and I'll turn it over to whichever of my colleagues would like to go first. First one to unmute gets to go first.
My audio just cut off, but go right ahead to the home base folks.
Great. Yeah, so we, just to recap, we have brought 3 questions to go over this evening with the task force. And the first one is really focusing in on your priorities and goals in terms of addressing homelessness. This is kind of a pivotal moment for your community as you look ahead to where you want to be going over the next 5 years. So really interested to get your thoughts on what you see as priorities and goals that you want to make sure are featured as a part of this plan. Any perspectives on how priorities have evolved over recent years, because that context is really important, as well as you look ahead, any changes you anticipate in the future that we should be mindful of as we put the plan together.
Thank you. Councilmember Wahab, do you want to start?
Thank you, Councilmember Lamnin. I have some questions, and I don't know if staff, and sorry, this is not necessarily for home base. It will get back to home base, but I just wanted to talk about the staff report a little bit too. So basically, and I have my notes here. In regards to the street teams partnership that we have, how much are the individuals paid for doing the work that they do?
So Julia Lang is, no, she's still here, but certainly could connect with her after the meeting.
Okay.
I just want to keep us focused on the strategic plan this evening.
Okay, so basically, I guess the areas that are unmet, and I think that there's a lot that is up in discussion that, people are working on and so forth. I guess I'm going to say mental health is an issue, but I feel like it's not the end all be all of what homeless folks kind of deal with. So primarily, I know I've read reports and stats that clearly state that jobs are one of the biggest factors. I think many of us are one paycheck away from not actually, being able to keep her a home. So I think that's a big factor of it. So employment. I don't think that we do enough around employment. I think that we are focusing a lot on, I hate to say it, Band-Aid solutions and not the long-term development of the wraparound services that are needed to sustain housing. And, we had an opportunity. We constantly in the city, we talk about preserving, protecting, and producing housing. And the reality is that we are not necessarily always in a position to produce and overproduce. And we talk about upzoning and multi different units and family structures and so forth. And we get a lot of pushback on that as well from the community. So I will say roughly in mid-November, we had an opportunity to protect residents from losing their housing, especially during COVID, and preserve their housing by making the rising rents based on inflation or the CPI rate, which other cities in the Bay Area have done. And I know Councilmember Salinas and I have voted for this, but ultimately Council rejected this. So I will say, I think that we do need to actually do more in regards to preserving and protecting. And I think that it is a missing concept in regards to when we provide permanent housing, what happens afterwards? Is it just, okay, 1 month they signed a lease and then, we go on and focus on somebody else? Or can we work with that individual to ensure that they are able to provide stable housing, maintain a job, look for a job, and get into certain skill sets to, definitely ensure that their housing is stable for more than a year. I don't think that we have enough metrics on the nonprofits we work with. I haven't seen data on where these individuals are housed. I know a lot of the housing that is being provided are well out of the Alameda County area because the cost of living is cheaper. So I personally think that, I hate to say this, but we're playing the shoveling game where we're kind of just taking and moving and saying, okay, we accomplished this because the metrics look good when we say we house this many people. But the reality is, for how long is that person in that same housing unit? Have they provided a decent, stable job, and so forth? And I want to highlight that it's not just our homeless population. I've worked significantly in different programs regarding domestic violence, and when partners split with each other, the shelters that provide housing to the individuals that are in kind of domestic violence situations is maxed to about 3 months. And then how does a person, advocate to get custody of their children? How does a person do all of this? How do they get a job if they were in an abusive relationship and not able to earn income? So I don't think that our metrics are good enough. And I agree with the comments that were listed by public comments that stated that homelessness is not, I guess they refer to it as invisible homelessness. And I've said in previous meetings, that if you are living with a friend, if you are couch surfing, if you are doing any of this, you were technically homeless. And, we may discount it because it's not, a tent on the street, but I do want to highlight that. So I do think that we don't put enough emphasis on the metrics from nonprofits, considering the fact that we are spending a significant amount of money on the nonprofits. We do not have long-term data on these individuals and being able to track the success of what works and what doesn't work. I haven't seen any data on this, at least in our reports thus far. And I hope that we can evolve this into a long-term big picture rather than some of these smaller, I hate to say it, but feel-good projects. So that is at least my vision. Hopefully in the next 5 years, we can focus a little bit more on employment, entry-level jobs, being able to, connect them to even union apprenticeship programs and so forth. And the individuals that are a little bit more difficult to support, I know that, we have mental health issues that we have to tackle, as well as substance abuse. So I think even, for example, our cannabis ordinance, one of the things I would love to see is that a portion of the funds goes to substance abuse programs that the city offers for Hayward residents. So I think there's a wide number of things that we can do, and I look forward to working on it and definitely providing input where I can. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Salinas?
Yeah, thank you. I was, as I was looking at those 2 slides with, with all of the work that staff has done along with council, we've a lot of work has been done in this space. I think a lot of work has been done, and I received an email. Last week, and the beginning of the email was about how the city hasn't done anything, and I and then I proceeded to read a lengthy email about how we need this and we need that and we need this and we need that, and I just wanted to just to acknowledge really the work of staff and and the work of this committee. And the work of council, we have done a lot, and in particular, I think we've done a lot within within the last 8 months. We've been sheltered in place for 8 months, and while we've been sheltered in place, we should also, be thinking about that. This is month 8 that people have not had money, and at least any kind of substantive money where they've been able to pay, rent and pay bills and so forth. So, page 2 of 7 of the staff report, I really, I think we should, perhaps at the very least, I think we should, if we haven't already done it, that should be a press release about, all of the work we've done. And I think it's because of the support of the community that we've been able to do this. But to go to the questions, I found myself kind of combining some of the questions, and I don't know if I'm sure Ms. Davis probably has a grid, and she's marking down all of our comments in a grid, and she's going to put them up on a spreadsheet somewhere and cross tabulate. So I may make this very difficult for her, but I was really priorities and goals. I found myself sort of outlining a bunch here, and I'm going to be as concise as I can. For me, a priority is data, is making sure that we have good quality data that accurately identifies the problem. And I know we've done that in the past. We have point-in-time surveys or point-in-time census, and I think we have some really good data. At least we have some starting points, and by now, the good thing is that we have data where we can compare and contrast, and we can look at progress, and then we can look at where we need to strengthen, and then move forward. So for me, a priority is to continue our work with data. I know we had a couple of faculty members from Cal State East Bay, and they are a research institution, and I'm glad that they're active, engaged in that space, and which is great. And in addition to that research activity, it's also very clear that they're also providing at least some programmatic efforts to house, and I agree with all the comments about all the variations of homelessness. I mean, there's I think it was the University of California who came out with the report a couple of years ago. They said that the largest homeless population in the state of California were students, community college, CSU, and UC students. And so it's good to see that Cal State East Bay is engaged in that space and continuing to work in there. The other, and these are in no particular order either. I'm just sort of moving around some areas. The other, I think, priority for me is emergency response. Right now, we're doing our best to respond. I mean, if you look at the 9 policy areas that we've have been covering, I think we've been responding good. I think we've been responding appropriately. Could we do more? Absolutely. Takes money, but I think for the amount of time that we've been doing this work and responding, I think we've done a pretty good job. And so I do agree with the caller with Mr. Okenda when he talks about our response to COVID-19. Mental health. I think that's it's not it is very obvious when you're in downtown or in other parts of the city that clearly there are people that are homeless, that clearly have issues, and so we have to continue to make that a priority. But the other thing too is when I think about mental health, I don't think that is a role for the city. I just don't think we have neither the staff, the infrastructure for that. That is a county issue. And I think if those county if those county structures exist, then I think we need to make them work for us. Let's, people have called, certainly they've called my office, and, they've everything from, the folks that are, angry and complaining and, about, homeless, out on the sidewalks and throwing stuff and yelling at them. And, and there's that. I get that. And then, I get the calls that are, seriously concerned and that are empathetic. And it kills me when my answer is nothing other than, well, there's nothing we can do. We have to call the county. And, and then they ask me, well, who do I call at the county? And I can't give them a number, or the number I do give them, they don't get a response, or the response is, well, we have such limited staff. And so, maybe the priority is making sure the county delivers what we expect, the services that we expect, right? The county is a service provider. And so, maybe that's something that we focus on. But that also shows that how, homelessness is what makes it so difficult is the mental health component. I mean, this is not a matter of just putting people in housing. I can't, it's difficult to forget what the data showed us a couple of years ago when we did a point in time census, where I think it was like 80 something, it was like 85% or 87% of the folks that we numerated, they could not live by themselves, or no, they could not live with other people, or they could not work with other people. So that's a serious issue, right? And so it, how we address that requires a lot of complex triaging and a lot of complex services and ongoing services. So, this is not a simple issue, and it's it's expensive, and it requires a lot of resources, money and staff and so forth. Which leads me to the issue of money. Everything, let me sort of step back a bit and say, I agree with everything that everybody said on the calls. There's nothing I disagree with. And I think, I don't want to sound like, that the consultants have wasted their time. They haven't. And we're going to go through this wonderful process. But, I'm down. I'm ready. Sign me up for everything that you guys come up with, because this is quite an easy policy discussion, because a lot of the as long as we clearly identify what the issues are, what the problem is, no one is going to disagree with the solutions, because I think everybody wants to see these things implemented. We've implemented some of it, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, virtually every one of these 9 items that we have in staff report, council has voted for it unanimously. And so, the support is there, the political support, the community support, staff support. But I think it's money, and it's, how we find revenue to pay for these things. I am cautious, and I might have to slightly disagree with my colleague, Council Member Wahab, about cannabis money. My concern is, we're looking at my concern about the discussions around cannabis, the revenue coming out of cannabis. It's given me to go to the question about what was the question? How has this issue evolved, or something like that? What concerns me is that cannabis in Hayward turns into what the Bay Bridge and Golden Gate Bridge have become in terms of revenue streams, right? What the idea was, once those bridges were built, that the bridges would be free, right? But we've become dependent on those bridges, on the revenue that those bridges have generated, that now we're paying $5 a trip to cross those bridges rather than not having to pay at all. And so we're looking at now, it seems like we're all looking at cannabis as cash cows in the city. And, and that's quite concerning because, what else are we going to start hanging on to these types of revenue streams to pay for some of these programs? So it's, I want to be careful with that, and I'm very mindful of that. But it's going to take a lot of money, and and so we just have to make sure we make that a priority. And lastly, and I'll make this my last comment. Interagency cooperation, I saw at the school board meeting a couple of weeks ago that the school board has moved to start implementing housing for unhoused students, and they're going to use the SIAC Center over on Tyrell in South Hayward. Great idea. I don't know if they talked to us. I don't know if they talked to anybody else about that. They might have talked about it at HLAC or something, but I mean, when I heard it, I was like, that's a great idea. There wasn't, I didn't see a whole lot of public, promotion about that, or, nobody, especially as a member of the Housing and Task Force, the Housing and Homelessness Task Force, and I'm not chiding staff on this, but I'm just saying, nobody talked to us about it. I don't know. They may have talked to Sarah. They might have talked to, Aisha. But, if we're going to do this, we got to do it together. And, we can't, if there's one thing that the Hayward Promise neighborhood, if there's one lesson we have learned in that organization, is we cannot work in silos. And so if we're serious about housing students, if we're serious about housing those with serious mental health issues and circumstances, if we're serious about housing seniors, if we're serious about housing, transitioning people from the navigation center to permanent housing, it's going to take a lot of agencies working together and cooperatively. And so, for me, that's a big priority. Anyways, I don't know if that answers your question, Ms. Davis, but hopefully I did.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Salinas. And I'll give some answers, and then I'll circle back to you, Amanda, in case there are outstanding questions. And so I'll start with the interagency collaboration that you ended with, Councilmember Salinas, and I agree with you completely. And it's a fair point. The shelter, the unaccompanied minor youth shelter, has been in the works for about a year or so, probably longer than that, but kind of got momentum about a year ago. And you're right, there was a presentation to HLAC. There was not a presentation to this group. We've really been focused on the housing side, but not the shelter side. So maybe we think about doing at least an informational update to this committee. And I think your broader issue is also well made of that things really have been siloed in Alameda County regarding homelessness. The idea that, it's the county's problem, it's the city's problem, it's behavioral health's problem, it's police's problem, it's maintenance services problem. And I think that has started to shift in the city. But in terms of, priorities, certainly, how do we either how do we bring people together in a collaborative way? How do we, Ms. Lang has been talking about this as well. How do we, and my colleagues did as well. And then how do we make sure that the money follows the accountability? that in Alameda County, a lot of money goes into some programs, some of which have great outcomes, and we have those statistics, some of which we never hear from again, and yet money after money tends to follow. And so how do we either redirect those funds or bring the accountability into those questions? So I also strongly agree that jobs is the key. It has come out. It was clear in the survey that the Cal State East Bay led a few years ago about homelessness. It comes out again in every survey, the need for jobs. Thank you for singing my song, Aisha. And the opportunity in Hayward to really have great career pathways. And it is the piece of homelessness that doesn't always get talked about. The jobs piece does, but the housing piece does, but not necessarily the jobs piece. And so for me, that's one of those top priorities. And I think I've talked about that before, so I won't belabor that point. I will, and in terms of what has shifted, the whole tone and tenor, the progress that has been made in this city is tremendous. We would not have had unanimous votes 10 years ago when we started these conversations, 11 years ago. And so you're right, Mark, the political will has shifted. The kinds of work that is happening now is outstanding. It is just amazing. And I give heartfelt congratulations and deeply, deeply held gratitude to our city staff who've been leading the efforts to get the progress we've had. And now I think in this idea to move beyond, to build on that great work and to move into a place where we're really looking at this strategically, not to be redundant there, but when I think about that, our response, even with all the great work that's happened, our response to increased visibility of homelessness in our downtown area is still an enforcement response, even though there is an outreach component to it. That one of our big pushes is more maintenance crews and more PD. We know that doesn't solve the issue. It doesn't get at the root issues. And so how do we make sure that we're engaging the folks who people are concerned about? No, it's not okay to have human waste on public streets, on business property. That's not okay. And what are we doing in engaging the folks that are in that situation, in that solution development, and in following through what those solutions are, carrying them out? So I'm thrilled to have YSA here tonight, because one of the things that's exciting about that is it's one of the models. We also have one in Castro Valley that's a little different in terms of a tiny homes model, but both of those are well partnered solutions and integrated collaborations to bring solutions and that really concrete housing solution. The homes that YSA are building are $12,500 a piece. You can't build housing for that, and you certainly can't build permanent supportive housing for that. But this kind of solution, partnered with services that the universities and the colleges and YSA and South Hayward Parish and Downtown Streets Team and so on, together we could really have a robust pathway for careers, for housing, for real success, moving people out of crisis and into self-sustainability. One of the final things is I think what has shifted over the last few years is substance abuse issues have been an issue in the city for a long time, and the lack of substance abuse treatment is long known. Mental health as a community awareness, when you read our community health reports, when you read our community satisfaction reports, mental health, that's a newer thing for our community in terms of demand. And we're seeing it across every conversation. So that's kind of evolving. And then in terms of models, there are that homelessness survey study that the Cal State East Bay co-led with the task force a number of years ago. I think you have the link, but if not, it's tinyurl/Hayward HC, as in homeless count. There's a bunch of models in there. 10-4 was a Fontana, California model that we really liked. And there's some others in there, I think East. And just for jobs specifically, things like East Bay Innovations in San Leandro, ROP here in Hayward, as well as some of our providers. There's some opportunities there to partner. And as Councilmember Wahab said, we have a number of labor unions in the community, and I think we included them in our asset mapping in our first meeting as well. So I have lots. I'm just very excited about this topic. So I will stop now, though, and ask Amanda, are there other things that you need from the task force members?
Thank you so much to all three of you for those really thoughtful and helpful responses. And I think you all did a really nice job of kind of walking through all three of the questions. So I won't belabor the point by walking us through those. But I think just one closing big picture question from our team is, what else do you want to make sure that we have in this strategic plan? What do you need in there to be able to move it forward? You know, in terms of answers or models, or just what do you need to be able to overcome some of the barriers you're experiencing right now? So if there's anything that sparks for you beyond what you've already shared, would love to hear it. But otherwise, we really appreciate all of those thoughtful responses.
Great. I want to go first to Councilmember Salinas, and I do see your hand, Councilmember Wahab, but I'll come to you next. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I was going to be real short. It's the interagency cooperation, and I think if and because interagency cooperation can be not only for the actual producing housing in whatever shape or form it is, right? It could be townhomes, it could be shelters, it could be navigation. But it can also be, in terms of mental health services and other types of services that folks need. So for me, it's interagency cooperation and revenue streams, in that how we can cooperate with and collaborate with one another and make sure we can meet those needs. But that's it.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Wahab.
Thank you. I personally would like a little more transparency in this entire process. For example, the steering committee, that was not clear to me on background or creation or anything like that. So I think that's a big piece of it. I also think the expansion, I think to Councilmember Salinas' point in regards to the different agencies, I do believe that government works in silos, and that's one of the biggest problems with large bureaucratic systems. I also believe that a funding source is incredibly vital. So, for example, the Hayward Navigation Center has a significant amount of funding from the city of Hayward. I don't believe it's sustainable, and I've mentioned this multiple times. Many other cities also do not believe it's sustainable, especially as we, and Councilmember Laminate and I sit on the budget committee, our projected revenue from taxes alone in the city are mostly looking negative. And I think that that's going to be the trend for a little while. With that, we also have to balance ensuring that we have, enough funds to maintain our regular priority services in the city and staffing levels just to meet the demand of the community. And to be quite frank, it was talked about what is the city's duties versus, all the other things we do. The actual duty of the city is only to discuss land use issues. Everything else we provide is something that has been adopted and long-term and stayed within our city services. So I do want to highlight that. And the situation is that a lot of our staff are actually looking outside for grants and so forth for a lot of the nonprofits that we support. Now, I fully do believe that we should be supporting these nonprofits and their efforts, but it shouldn't necessarily all fall within our staff, especially as we move forward with limited resources ourselves. So I do want to highlight a financial supportive component that needs to be highlighted, and all projects, in my opinion, should be self-sustaining. And whether that means partnerships with other organizations or businesses or whatever the case may be, happy to do those intros and so forth. But eventually it needs to be a self-sustaining model. I will also say that other cities, for example, BACs in particular, they if you call them, they will go out to an area that has a lot of unhoused individuals. And they have a lot of other programs in other cities where they kind of have a rolling center. I think some of the problems that we are going to be tackling are extremely difficult for us to tackle. For example, mental health. That's a state issue where when they close down a lot of our institutions, John George, I'm going to be frank, if somebody ends up needing some support there, within a day or two, they are released. Sometimes they are not even fully admitted, even if they have a psychotic episode. And that is not a failure of the city. That is a failure of the system. So I do want to highlight that, but I do want a financial component to it.
Okay, thank you. And I apologize for the background noise. I think the only thing I have to add to that in response to your question is kind of to build on Councilmember Salinas' comment about collaboration and the comments made earlier about that is that the city does many, many things very, very well. And we've sort of gotten in the habit of assuming that when we decide to do something, that it is up to the city to do it. A little bit reflecting what Councilmember Wahab was talking about as well, I think, if I understand you correctly, Councilmember Wahab. And so the opportunity for community partners, for the folks who are affected by homelessness, the opportunity for other jurisdictions, that are also impacted by the issues of homelessness or joblessness, or how with being without homes, permanent housing, or housing affordability. The issues touch on a lot of folks, and so that as we have a plan that we're looking at, what are the roles that everybody can play in solving the issues or addressing the issues.
Thank you. Really appreciate those responses, and we're really at the early end of this this process, and there's going to be kind of a lot of steps to solicit input from such a huge variety of people. I think it'll be really important for us to kind of have this grounding that we got from this conversation today to help inform how we're orienting moving forward. So really appreciate each of your thoughtful responses to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, I apologize for the background noise, but I hope that I'm coming through clearly and that, okay, Councilmember Wahab, did you have a final thing on this? No. Okay.
No, we're on the next one, right? Yeah.
Okay. So anything else from city staff or anybody else on the strategic plan? Okay. Great. Thank you. So then we will move on to our next agenda item, which is the legislative update, I believe. And who's got that one?
Did we not have 3 questions for in the staff report?
Right, and that was when we opened up the comments, that was the opportunity to answer those.
Okay.
So Christina is going to provide a quick update on housing legislation. There wasn't a lot of housing legislation. I think there were hopes for some really big housing solutions at the legislative level this year, but because of the pandemic, it didn't really pan out. But there were some, and so Christina, if she's on there, she's going to go ahead and share her screen and give you a quick overview. But honestly, a little disappointing that we didn't have more legislation that really moved the needle in terms of housing. But like a lot of things this year, it didn't quite happen. Christina, you got it?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. So as Jen has mentioned, I have a just brief presentation on a review of the new housing legislation and homelessness legislation that was passed here in the state of California. Really still trying to determine how, I shared have the right, you can see the PowerPoint, right? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, it wasn't changing for a second, so I was second guessing myself. And so we really what we saw is that there was really no big reforms this year. We saw some modifications of the existing legislation, COVID-related legislation, and of course the one voter-approved measure related to housing as well. And so the modifications, there were a variety of topics that a variety of legislation that was changed. So the density bonus legislation was expanded. I know that we talked in our incentives to housing production work plan about expanding the density bonus regulations, but the state has already expanded it to provide a bonus of up to 50% of the allowable density, and also decreasing the thresholds for the incentives that are provided. The SB 35 streamlining has also been modified. They realized through the process that there was not a process to consult California Native tribes. And so now they will require a notice of intent and also, if applicable, a scoping consultation. So that might slow the process down for the SB 35s. We're still looking at what the implications are of it, but it definitely has a better, looking at some of the elements of CEQA that were removed that are beneficial for the community to evaluate further. There's also housing entitlement extensions that are related to the consultations with the Native tribes. Parking requirements for religious institutions that have affiliated housing projects have been modified to allow 50% of the parking spaces to be dedicated to housing without requiring any kind of replacement parking. It does not, however, change the zoning. So it does not, if the area is zoned for single family housing, even though you could use 50% of your parking spaces for housing, if it's zoned for single family, then you're limited on what you could develop there. So once again, still trying to determine what the implications are of these different legislations. There are also modifications to the foreclosure process. This one would allow a tenant or somebody who intends to purchase a house and owner occupy it, local governments, land trusts, nonprofit housing developers, to have the opportunity to be the last and highest bidder. I believe if it's an owner, if it is a tenant that is looking to bid on the property, then they actually only have to match the last and highest bid of a property that's sold through auction. It's also expanded the right to terminate a lease in instances of domestic violence. Currently, I believe it only applies to individuals who've experienced domestic violence, and now it extends to family members. The leaseholder does not necessarily have to be the person who experienced the domestic violence. And then the ADU right now, it requires that ADUs be deemed complete, the application be deemed complete within 60 days after submitting the application. From my understanding, that our approval process is very fast, so it wouldn't necessarily have any impact on the way that we're approving applications for ADU. So the modifications are minor. It's kind of building off the work that was done in previous years. So the COVID-related legislation we discussed, I think, we discussed in a lot more detail in our last meeting, but we're looking at the Tenant Relief Act, the Small Landowner and Homeowner Relief Act. There's mobile home protections, and then housing entitlement extensions, which I mentioned on the last slide, but in this context, they are allowing for an 18-month extension for any project whose entitlements would expire from March 4th, 2020 until the end of 2021. So it gives an automatic extension for certain types of development projects, not for the permits and not for development agreements, but for their entitlements, their tract maps, things that would be expiring during this time period. And lastly, Proposition 19 that was approved by the voters would allow homeowners over 55, individuals who are disabled, wildfire disaster victims, to transfer their primary residence tax base to a replacement resident. And so this is modified where it had its more limitations. It's now expanded that you could go anywhere in the state. It also changes taxation of family property transfers and establishes fire protection services funds. So we would be looking to the county assessor's office for implementation of this. And once we have that information, be able to refer people to the taxing entity in terms of property tax. I am available if anybody has any questions.
Thank you. Do my colleagues have questions? Seeing any hands and, oh, there we go. Yes, Councilmember Waha.
Thank you. Doing a physical hand for a second.
I saw them both at the same time, the blue one and yours.
No worries. I'd like to know if we're going to promote or at least inform residents a little bit more about how these policies can affect them locally. I know some of them are a little bit more abstract and a little bit, I'm going to say larger for our city, but the things that residents can take advantage of, I guess this is not a question. I'm going to make a statement. If we can announce it on the stack or newsletters or social media. So for example, I know Director Ott, I may have already emailed you regarding Prop 19 and just making sure that we have some of those informations available. I know people are interested in ADUs. I had one or two people ask me about like if they were to improve their home, especially as we are working for, those fixer-uppers in Hayward, which we have plenty of, how can we help residents do this, right? How can we streamline it? How can we improve these areas? And I know that you have a lot on your plate and much more coming soon. So I just hope that we can just make it more tangible and easy to understand and follow for the average person who's not really interested in policy, if you will. That's
Great.
it. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, it didn't go back to the community question. We'll do that at the end. There was a question raised from the public at the last item, and I'm sorry, I meant to circle back to that, and I didn't, but I will after we finish the legislation part of this conversation. Councilmember Salinas, did you have any questions? No? Okay. I had a couple. Can you very quickly reiterate the foreclosure item? I know you said it, and it was new to me, and I didn't get it all. I apologize.
It's not, so I think it's easier to understand is a pseudo tenant right of first refusal process.
That's what it sounded like. So,
but yeah. It's actually, when you look at the detail, gives them the opportunity to be the last bidder. So where right of first refusal, you would have the first option to purchase as long as you could pay the market price. But this establishes what the price would be through the foreclosure sale auction process. And then if you are an eligible bidder, which would include somebody who is an existing tenant, or somebody who intends to buy the home and occupy the home. So I think part of the intent is to prevent the homes to be transferred to investors. If you were a city government or the local government, a land trust or a nonprofit housing developer, you would be in this category of eligible bidder, and you could put in the last and final offer. And I believe my understanding is that if you're a tenant, you only have to match the last bid. If you're somebody who is planning to own or occupy, you would have to exceed it. But if you already know what the bid was, you exceed it by $1, what that would be. So it would work similar though to right of first refusal.
Good to know. Maybe one of the things we want to track as we continue to talk about how do we create ownership opportunities in our community, and hopefully we prevent a lot of foreclosures in our community. But yeah, that investment capturing of properties is what I'm really worried about. So as we've talked about before, so cool. Thank you. And then there was something about mobile homes.
Right. So mobile homes, there are the protections similar to the renter protections, but they've also changed the rent control requirements under the state. So some of the limitations that it currently has, they have removed them. They're also looking at, it will require that if you're changing the use of the mobile home lot, it would change the process within the local government for determining whether that use could be changed. So it puts in more criteria to be able to do a conversion of a mobile home project in order to protect the tenants. Still working, that one's a little more complex, so looking at more of the details of what would be involved with that one.
Appreciate it. I know our mobile home community has been very vocal about conversions and protection. So good to see. And I think, as we look at, hopefully we're looking at these tiny home models, especially the YSA one is on wheels. Those are really kind of, they're classified as an emergency shelter, but they function in some ways as a kind of a mobile home. And again, the opportunity to have some of these units, especially the ones, for instance, in the Castro Valley Tiny Homes Village, where it is a self-contained with a kitchen and a bathroom, the opportunity for those to become ownership. And then perhaps we do look at some new mobile home opportunities, but really with this low-income lens might be interesting. Mm-hmm. Be interesting to see where this legislation, if this legislation is facilitative at all. Okay. And then lastly, it looks, the last count, it looked like Measure W was passing in Alameda County. Barely,
I did. I'm afraid I forgot to check up on that one. So yes, I haven't looked at the most recent figures on that, but that would provide funding for homelessness services for Measure W.
So I think, as we had talked about in the last item, funding is an issue. And so how do we protect any measure? How do we make sure that Measure W dollars reach our community regularly and in the level that is equitable for our community? So we'll be interested to see, and whether or not this committee needs to go to the county for those conversations, because I don't think any of that's been decided yet. Do you know?
No, I don't. I think it's still open how they intend to spend that money.
Yeah, and I think this is Jennifer.
Yeah, please.
I think of it is a general tax. So that's how it was, it was structured. So I do think strong advocacy on the behalf of the city to push for those dollars to be committed towards homelessness. And, obviously allocating to great projects like the ones we have in Hayward will be important. So I think absolutely, because they are not restricted towards homelessness, although, that was kind of we hope as voters was kind of the intent of them. So I definitely agree. And we will be advocating for that pretty strongly at the staff level. And I think it'd be great to have the council involved in that too.
Yeah, and even if they just followed the Measure A1 kind of formula, there's some value to that. But the county homelessness dollars have traditionally gone where the homelessness dollars have always gone, and this is a great time to do some innovation. And so good. Thank you. Okay, we'll close out this item, and then we'll go back to that question about I think it was a bathroom access and mental health. Downtown bathroom access was the community question, and possibly mental health. And Councilmember Wahab, did you have something else on legislation?
Not on legislation.
Okay, so we'll go to
Jessica. I think is gonna.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jessica.
Hi there. So the question on the community restroom. So currently there are 2 portable restrooms at the backside of City Hall. And then the plan is to reopen the permanent bathroom facility at the Watkins Garage with some improvements to the infrastructure so that it doesn't face the same issues that it was having in the past. It was being destroyed really easily. And so that's the infrastructure upgrades that are happening. And I know that Commissioner Vasari has also been having conversations around the plaza restroom, which I do not think that there is a set plan for that restroom at this time. So this is a separate permanent restroom that is being opened up in early 2021.
Okay, thank you. Great. And I apologize, I didn't see earlier that we had a public comment from Commissioner Kenda. I'm guessing this is on the legislation. So can we open that up for that opportunity very quickly, and then we'll get to the concluding parts of our agenda.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for letting me jump on here and add one more public comment on this particular item. For the past legislation at the state level, there's a few kind of things in the pipeline that I'm aware of through my advocacy at a reentry organization right now, Root and Rebound. We do a lot of advocacy for people who are formerly and currently incarcerated and their families. A lot of the work that I'm seeing people in the Bay and also across the state organized for right now is fair chance housing legislation. So I know that we're talking about a lot of these barriers that prevent people from getting housing or moving to more stable housing. One of the issues that has come up, there's a LA Times article that was recently published on crime-free housing program. I sent in a Public Records Act request with the HPD on the program. And with regards to the phase 1, teaching landlords and property owners on rental screening practices for people with records and conviction histories, and also putting in clauses in the rental agreements that allow for nuisance evictions. Part of the reason why I bring this up, I think what's often glossed over in the homelessness community is the barriers that people face with criminal convictions or arrest records, and their barriers to housing. And a great deal of the people who are currently unhoused in the population are disproportionately criminalized for a number of reasons, whether it be for poverty or for having a criminal history for some other reasons. So I just wanted to flag that potential. I know that Oakland has a fair chance housing ordinance that they passed. Berkeley has one, Emeryville. It would be a great opportunity for Hayward to look at that in moving forward in the next few months or year, looking to those as models to help break those barriers down for people who are formerly incarcerated and in reentry. That's the only thing I wanted to add in terms of like the legislative context for some of the solutions that might be in the pipeline and that are also at our disposal. So thanks again for letting me speak.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay. Hearing nothing else on legislative, we'll go on to our tentative agenda schedule and future. We'll put together the future agenda items in the tentative agenda schedule conversation together. So, Aisha, did you have something on this?
On the future agenda, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And granted, there was no reminder on the staff report, so I just will wing it. I do have a question for staff. If everything that we've kind of been advocating for on this subcommittee, and things have changed because of COVID, what can we, by any chance, just see a laundry list of policy ideas that even potentially staff has been considering that that would be beneficial? Now, the reason why I ask is because, for example, Mr. Okenda, who talked about reentry and some of the difficulties there, there are some individuals, or some cities, I should say, that have a ban the box approach, right? So it can't even be asked on certain applications. Those are very simple things that can be addressed. So I kind of just wanted to hear feedback from staff in regards to that.
Yeah, sure. I think mainly we take our direction from the strategic roadmap, which the council approved. And that included, for instance, the incentives to housing plan, which had a whole laundry list of items that we are working on implementing. And then the strategic plan, that is partially the main objective, is to kind of put together a whole list. And we had a lot of conversation about that. Well, should we start to put some of those ideas about how to address homelessness in the strategic plan, or should we really focus on the NAV Center and then the strategic plan? And that strategic plan will then outline those future steps and things that we're going to do. So I think we do have those laundry lists, so to speak, are embedded in some of these other plans that we've worked on. But otherwise, I think we're pretty transparent about what we're working on. I mean, that what you see in the strategic plan.
Let me address the question. With COVID affecting a lot of what we thought we were going to work on, right. Can we get an update on kind of what has kind of gone to the top of that list because of the fact that, maybe it's more doable at this point in time versus what we really wanted, but has kind of gone down based on your input and staff's input. So that's one thing I would like to see, at least. It could be an informational, just shoot an email saying, hey, this is kind of where we're at. So I do want to see that. And I know I've talked a lot about home ownership. So I do want to see a little bit more emphasis around that, almost as a priority, at least for me, because I think that that's a big piece of it. And I know I've spoken to our city manager, and I know I've mentioned it to you too, is that when we as a city are looking to purchase foreclosures, right, because of tax issues and, liens and so forth. I think, maybe about 2 quarters ago, we had a handful of properties, maybe pre-COVID, right? And we do this roughly every year through the county. We see what properties we would potentially invest and so forth. And since the city has potential capital to be able to do this compared to an individual organization or nonprofit, I do believe that it is something of interest to be able to see if we can purchase those homes and provided kind of, I want to say, below market rate, depending on obviously the size of the home and so forth. And obviously those calculations can be made to the public with a pre-qualification of, Hayward residents and so forth first. So that is something I would like to see if possible.
Yeah, and if I could just respond, the laundry list of what we've added, because we actually added quite a few efforts, like the rent relief program, like the hotel annex project, and both kind of no small feat. And we have a list of all that's all done. What we're planning to do is a retreat with the council on an update to the strategic plan, because a lot of the departments were in that same boat. Like maintenance services has added a number of programs related to COVID, and some things have there's been some trade-offs, and we want to make sure the council weighs in on those trade-offs and makes the ultimate decision about what gets prioritized. Do we want to continue a rent relief program? Well, if we want to continue that program, what might have to come off the plate? And so we already have that list. It's ready to go, and we're kind of vetting it one last time through the executive team, and then it'll come to the council in January at a retreat where you'll have a lot of time to digest it and talk about it. So I just want.
And then if we do get that, and the reason why I'm concerned about that is because sometimes on these retreats, we have so much information from multiple different departments. And obviously, we only have so many hours that we can review it. If we can get that ahead of time, just to be able to review it, that's always beneficial. So I do appreciate that.
That's a great suggestion.
Even if it's like draft form, it's just kind of, thoughts or so forth. And then as far as, our home-based people are still online. One of the things I do want to say in regards to the steering committee is the input from staff members. So we have a lot of individuals, for example, from the maintenance staff, police, fire, or so forth, that do engage significantly with our homeless population for a wide variety of reasons. I do think that they have shown an interest in the previous survey that we've done for just even one department that showed that some may have interest in providing input. So I always think it's good to kind of just, even if it's a survey, just out and saying whoever would like to partake and share some information that they have with very open-ended responses, so they can kind of just be free to share their ideas.
Jessica, do you want to talk about that? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just wanted to address that point. So Homebase is coming. So we have a couple standing meetings with some of these departments that you mentioned. And so Homebase will be coming to one of our weekly encampment response meetings. And that includes staff from maintenance services, code enforcement, fire department, police department, community services. I think that covers the encampment response meeting, which they're coming to Tuesday, the 8th. And then Homebase is also going to be coming to our larger homelessness response meeting body, which is all of those departments plus city attorney's office, city manager's office, housing, development services. It's quite a large meeting body, as well as doing, I believe, some targeted interviews with some of these staff as well. So we are definitely engaging these folks on the plan.
Okay. And then in regards to almost all our efforts, if we are able to also acknowledge the public health impact. So for example, I hate to mention this, but the defecation in the middle of a sidewalk or things like that. That is a public health risk. We also have a bunch of creeks that we know that some neighbors are complaining that, there's, tent cities around there and it's straight into the water and so forth. So just making sure that whatever report we get or any input, there is a public health component to it as well. Thank you.
Yeah, and do you mind if I just mention, if I could respond to the home ownership issue too, and because it comes up a lot, and I just want you to know, I mean, we did come earlier this year with a pretty comprehensive report on how we can potentially address home ownership, and I think the big issue is one of funding, and we did go after a couple $1 million of state funding to try to, pay for a program where we could be involved in purchasing some of the units that you're talking about. And so we are pursuing avenues for that. And it really does come down to funding. And to be honest, it also comes down to prioritizing that funding. And what our staff, Christina, we go to a lot of meetings and webinars and things about affordable housing and what you hear a lot of is right now, given the COVID crisis, the most vulnerable populations are renter populations, and that they're really highly encouraging any entity that has money to put it into to units that are going to provide rental housing to those populations. That doesn't mean that's what the council has to do, and that you can weigh it against. I just wanted you to understand that that's really where the focus is in the larger kind of field of affordable housing is given the vulnerability that we're experiencing right now, is to be careful about spreading your money too thin, but to really concentrate it in helping the most vulnerable.
100%. I fully agree with that, and hence why I advocated for the tenant protections and the moratorium for both commercial and residential. My suggestion as we pivot, because of COVID has ruined so many things, and obviously the home buyer program was for residents, not necessarily that program regarding foreclosures and some of the liens that have happened. So two separate programs in my mind. But one of the things is also to be able to partner with some of our housing providers. Specifically, I think Bay East could potentially, they put on webinars all day, every day on a lot of different homeowner type of educational things. And then they would potentially, if we can just co-host something as the city to provide some resources to individuals that would like to purchase, whether it's how to, secure a decent home loan, things like that. And our local banks also have a lot of programs in place. So I think that let's just partner where we can and still fight the good fight on the other front. So thank you.
Yeah, and we do have resources through CDBG and the CARES Act where we're providing homeowner counseling, and we are recommending, as you'll see on Tuesday night, having some portion of that latest round of CARES Act money going towards helping people with loans. It's a smaller portion than the rent relief, just for that very reason. We're proportionally wanting to focus on the vulnerable renter population, but we do propose allocating some of those funds towards what you're talking about as well. And we're happy to create relationships and partner with people where we can.
Definitely. You guys do a great work, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
They absolutely do. Mark, anything on, Councilmember Salinas, on either future agenda items or comments on the tentative schedule?
No, but the only thing I was wondering is over on Jennifer Ott Drive. I wonder, is that a one-way? Is that a two-way? Or is that a loop?
I'm gonna have to take that down. It's a very popular street. It's where our jackets and our shoes are stored. So.
Yeah. Basically. No, that's it.
Okay. Thank you. You've got it covered clearly. So I think the only upcoming agenda item I had was a thought that, when we started this task force 2 years ago, we did some brainstorming around what did people want to see, what did they want to talk about. And so perhaps now that the council has approved another 2 years of this committee, I believe we already had that item, yes? Or am I confusing that with?
I think it's next week. It's next week. Yep.
Okay, so sorry, I forgot that it was on the future agendas and not the actual agendas. I've been reading a lot of agendas. I apologize. Thank you for the correction. So if council approves an extension, then I would recommend that at the March meeting, we dedicate a little time to brainstorming. And I invite staff that it's not about making more work for staff, but it's what is it that this committee still needs to tackle.
Yeah, and I think some of that may come up as part of the retreat on the strategic roadmap when you're talking about that housing priority. I think we'll probably hear some themes from that from you, and so we will listen carefully to that, and then we can also help come up with some ideas about how to prioritize your agendas. Because
yeah, exactly. And yeah, I guess I expect the list to be fairly long, and so what is reasonable to tackle and what things might go together. And
right, and not everything necessarily, I mean, this is for you guys to think about, is not everything has to come through the task force, right? But what are those items where you really want to take that extra step of being really deliberate and careful and having a little more community input, and things like the strategic plan, things like some of the rent legislation. And so we'll be thinking too, but it's good for you guys, we think, for the task force to think, what are those projects that really need to come through you? Because I don't think we'll be able to get everything through the task force either, so.
That's fair. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And then just to clarify on something you said around rent relief and related to COVID and housing ownership. I mean, it's a fair point that the crisis is huge, and I certainly am not pulling energy from that. I am thinking though about units that may come on the market where again. They become like our Aloha apartments and that whole set of things that was, investor bought. And that's a great opportunity that if, with a little bit of help, if the tenants could become owners there, not that the city manages it long term, that, we partner with perhaps an Oakland CLT or something like that to have that. Then suddenly we've created a bunch of home ownership opportunities all at one swell food, as they say, or the opportunity to look at, are there units that partnering with, for instance, the Alameda County Housing Housing Authority of Alameda County, who owns units, and so whether or not it makes sense for those to become ownership, and then those subsidies can help somebody else who may be new in crisis, because we never get to open up the Section 8 list. So just, I don't want to say nothing to ownership, and I know that's not what you're saying, of course, but it's just wanted to push a little continued creativity
and how to find those partnerships and how to do it in a cost-efficient way so that we can be helping people during this crisis. No, I get it, and so we will be looking for those partnerships, and that's why we jumped on the Cal Home application, and so we'll keep looking for those opportunities. And I think my understanding is Christina Morales was in Oakland running a homeownership program during the Great Recession, so has a lot of experience dealing with homeownership programs during times like this. So she will obviously be bringing her expertise to the table too.
We say it every meeting, and I will say it again. We have phenomenal staff in both our community services and our housing department. All of you really appreciate your creativity and your dedication and your insights to do exactly what you said, the best we can do with the least amount of funds and with the highest impact. It's really remarkable work. I appreciate it.
It is a great staff, and Christina and Monica and everybody. So yes, thank you to them.
Absolutely. All right. Anything else for the good of the order? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Happy holidays.
You too. Thank you.
Happy holidays. Thank you, everyone.